Lizette Lancaster is Crime and Justice Information Hub Manager at the Institute for Security Studies, joining us to unpack the quarterly crime stats that have just been released. Lizette, good afternoon. Thanks for your time with the SABC at this hour.
Thank you for having me.
Just as we look at the data emerging and we begin to interpret the data, given the announcement of the crime stats, how effective were the interventions and the strategy for the period in question, the 1st of October to the 31st of December, in essence, the festive period?
So when we look at some of the most reliable crime categories, such as murder, we do see that there have been a slight increase of 155 cases, or 2.1%. This comes on the back of 2 quarters where we've seen decreases for the first time since the COVID pandemic. However, when we start looking at these murder figures and comparing them to the same quarters of 2019, before the pandemic hit, we do see quite marked increases in the murder statistics. And that especially in provinces such as Gauteng, where we are starting to see 30 to 40% increases in murder depending on the quarter. So then that's also at the same time where Malau was introduced, that's Operation Shanela is based on. So we are a little bit concerned that these are not yielding the results that are required. The minister did speak of successful prosecutions of and life sentences and other long-term sentences for perpetrators of violent crime, and of course we welcome these, because if we do remove people from society, especially the repeat offenders around sexual violence and organized crime, of course we should see decreases in these type of crimes. We are seeing successes with busts, but of course we need to see more kingpins being arrested and successfully prosecuted. We are seeing lots of arrests, but the question is what happens to those cases. So for the first time, as I point out, we are starting to see some stabilization since COVID, but it's still at alarmingly high rates.
Lizette, thank you for weighing on that. Just given the trends that obviously is emerging through the data, what are the trends in violence in South Africa revealing at this point? And from your vantage point, are we losing the fight against crime or are we winning?
I think we are winning at certain types of crimes and at certain places. We see successful task teams with things like kidnapping and for extortion, but kidnapping is still on the rise. We are seeing in over, like almost a 300% increase since 2 decades ago. So it is not slowing down. We are seeing the same numbers or higher numbers of kidnapping in all its various forms. We are seeing increases still in armed robberies, driven mostly by crimes such as carjackings and home robberies. These are violent crimes that are perpetrated against ordinary citizens in our streets and in our homes. Those crimes are the ones that we fear the most. And when linked to murder, of course, this is very alarming. I mean, for this quarter, it means that when we look at the most reliable crime statistic, murder, 84 people on average were murdered in the country a day between October and December. And some of them were mostly because of, our festive season, interpersonal violence that take place often in our places of where we relax, in our homes, in our places of entertainment, fueled by alcohol and drugs. But we also see these group violence, taxi violence, vigilantism, and other forms of organized crime, robberies taking place with carjackings increased significantly, as I pointed out. Cash in transit stabilizing, but still at high levels of 46 during these 3 months. And the other types of robbery and sexual violence that is still at alarmingly high levels.
And beyond loss of life, quality of life and safety and security, I mean, the pressures from social tensions, wealth inequality and even organized crimes have knock-on effects. How would you say it's, impeded on our economic growth as a country? I also want to bring in load shedding into the mix and look at its knock-on effects as well.
Of course, we as a nation feel far more exposed and vulnerable during load shedding, and especially in the dark. We have seen a big business and even small entrepreneurs highlighting their plight for an end to load shedding because of the economic woes that it brings about. We've seen big corporates such as VW appealing to government to please bring an end to load shedding because of the risk it has to the 72-year operations in the country and the risk of unemployment rising. So we know food security is increasing, food insecurity is increasing, insecurity in general, unemployment is at alarmingly high levels, especially youth unemployment. So all these things have a knock-on effect, and it allows for organized crime syndicates at grassroots levels to grow and expand their operations, whether it's local extortion groups, whether it is the construction mafia, and whether it's just gangs running rampant, as we've seen in Inanda and in places in the Cape Flats, as well as places like Bheki in the Eastern Cape. So we are seeing this proliferation and entrenchment in organized crime because people have no alternative to gain employment, put food on the table.
Lizette, just as we wrap up, also just because it is a election year, I wanted to look at concerns arising as we look at police killings this time round, but also the political killings that have come to the fore. What are you also noting on that front?
Yes, we are not seeing a slowing down of political killings. We are seeing it will likely increase with the contestation of new parties emerging in places like KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng, Eastern Cape, and even contestation in other provinces such as the Western Cape. We are anticipating more tension ahead of the elections, but also after the elections when we start seeing people getting into power and people feeling disgruntled because they didn't make it into power. So we are in for a bumpy ride, and this is where we need to appeal to all South Africans to condemn violence in the strongest forms in their communities, in their streets and in their homes.